tell us, why did you decide to study lucid dreaming?
It's curious. I was interested in consciousness. And this was still in the dark ages that we have been hearing about, that Alan so well described, that conscious was this dirty word. And this is in the late 70s. And I was at Stanford with the possibility to do a dissertation on whatever topic I wanted, but it had to be, for me, consciousness. How to do that, because it was a dirty word, really. In the psychology department, people didn't use that term. It wasn't polite. So I noticed, though, an oddity is that there were some people doing research on consciousness at Stanford at the time, in fact. William DeMint had been doing research on dreams, the psychophysiology of dreaming. And that means measuring the physiological correlates while a person is having some sort of conscious experience. And then after they wake them up, they would report their conscious experience and then use the physiology to understand more or to corroborate those reports. Now, that's not what they called it, but that's exactly what it was. It was consciousness studies. So I thought, here's something I can do. And at the same time, I had also had sufficient experiences with lucid dreams, being in a dream. So here I am. And then suddenly something tells me that this is actually all in my mind, that I am asleep in bed now. Yet here I am in this room with all these apparent people, and it seems as vivid as that. And it was like the exact example was climbing up K2 in a snowstorm, and I'm wearing shorts and short sleeve, and I'm going up this mountain, and it's I don't seem to be properly prepared for this. And this is a dream. So I flew off the mountain, and that was a start. Of course, now I would say, well, going up the mountain, well, go up the mountain. Well, that's the idea, don't just fly off and whatever, but it takes learning. But so the idea was going from chemical physics through the psychedelic revolution happening in California in the late 60s. I wanted to do research.
Which we don't know anything about.
We don't know anything about, but I did want to research then for my dissertation the chemistry of the mind. Understand how psychedelics somehow mysteriously can produce this amazing states of consciousness. But of course, it was impossible in those days. And that's how, years later, I finally found something practical, which was dreaming. So that
practical.
Yeah, that's right. It's what it's happened to be. So, and I was surprised at how much interest and potential there was in this state that I had been working on it ever since. So I spent 25 years at Stanford doing laboratory research on lucid dreaming, understanding how to do it and what to do with it. So.
But how can lucid dreaming, what can lucid dreaming teach us about consciousness? What's the result of your study?
Yeah.
What did you come up with?
Well, there are many answers to the question, but they're really starting at the most basic one. It's one has the experience of being in a dream, we say, meaning that you know that whatever you're experiencing is somehow only in your mind and that you're not eyes open seeing a world out there. And so you say, oh, but wait, look, this all seems as real can be. How can that be? That tells you that the reality of the world, the experiential reality of the world cannot be outside of ourselves. It's not what common sense says, which is that you look through the windows of the eyes and there you see the world, and that's the physical world, that's what's real, that. And in fact, you understand, no, the experience of seeing anything has to be in your mind, and there's nowhere else it can be. And so, but it's not just an intellectual understanding of that, but having a first-hand experience where you see for yourself it must be so. And this is a very important distinction between sort of you know about it in theory versus you experience it directly and see reality has to be other than what I have been led to believe all this time. So it has the possibility for a life transforming, certainly a worldview transforming potential that has changed my life in many particular ways. But there are many other answers to the question about I think just one other angle on it to think about is that most of the studies we have, scientific studies in consciousness, are based on the waking state. That's, we do experiments in the waking state, measure brain waves and so on, and make conclusions based on that. But we need another set of data points that are a different state. And when we compare what we learn from in the waking state and how things work here with how things work in a state with very little sensory input, so it's sort of the mind in pure culture. It's the mind left to its own devices. Now, how does it work? And so that provides an extra angle, and it shows us also. It's like knowing a second language. If you know a second language, then you know what a language is. If you only have the language you learned from your mother, the mother tongue, then that is a foreign tongue to you. You just don't know until you've got a comparison. So we know by comparison, by contrast, by seeing more than one state, and you've got to do that to understand. So,
to me, the thing that the major gift that I received from meeting you and learning about lucid dreaming when it was 16, 18 years ago, as I said, I was a lousy lucid dreamer. I've been still a lousy lucid dreamer, but I still can go there once in a while. And I love it. I love it. The thing I learned, I transferred the lucid dreaming attitude to real life. Yes. So to me, what I did, I found this reality way more malleable and manageable than what is supposed to be.
Yes.
So I want to hear from you. What is, in your opinion, like this conference is an example. There is no way anybody that is not thinking is dreaming can come up with an idea of putting something like this together. It's totally stupid.
Sure.
But it happened, and it happened because there was no fear, because it was a dream, really, the reality. Sure. So how do you see the relationship between lucid dreaming and reality?
Yeah, well first of all, I only, by laziness, use reality in that sense. It's sort of the usual way it's used, but for me, I wouldn't say that reality is limited to actuality, and that's a term for whatever is the physical reality plus whatever else is a specific level of reality with extra features of certainty. But it's that a reality is what you experience directly. And this is, of course, what you just heard from Alan, the only thing you know directly. The reality is experience, that here I am, that the basic point of the awareness that it's at the root, the matrix of all experience is I am, or even I am is the wrong word because it's you can't use any word for it, but it's referring to the awareness, the sort of the primordial state that is prior to brains, it's prior to space and time. It's the source of the world, it's the potential, not the actual. And so this is the same difference of the world of actuality. The distinction might be, think of all card games you might play, just as one world of discourse. And if you've got a card game where you say the ace is high, in that particular card game, it's an actual game, there is no way the deuce beats an ace, right? Period. It's limited. But of course, there's an infinite number of card games, for example, in which, well, the deuce is high, right? Why not? So somebody's got to be. So the idea is actuality is a selection of a broader set of potential realities, what can be. I think this is analogous to the notion that consciousness, of course, is what we are attending to. It's the selections we've made out of many other possibilities. And this is where we get to the idea of what I prefer to call awareness, and in fact, I'm followed or preceded by the reading of the day from, yes, here we go, the very Bible of this group.
The
right?
Bible, our
yes,
Bible.
Yes. And that is that I think one of the problems we have with consciousness studies in general is the confusion of consciousness and awareness, is that people don't make the distinction, and that gets things complicated. So I hear people will say things like consciousness is eternal or continues beyond form, but that to me doesn't quite compute, because form is what changes. And so, but the thing that doesn't, that's like consciousness but isn't consciousness, is awareness. And so Nisarga Datta here says in chapter 11 right here, so you use the words aware and conscious. Are they not the same? He says, awareness is primordial. It is the original state, beginningless, endless, uncaused, unsupported, without parts, without change. Consciousness is on contact, a reflection against a surface, a state of duality. There can be no consciousness without awareness, but there can be awareness without consciousness, as in deep sleep. So awareness is absolute, consciousness is relative. To its content, consciousness is always of something. Right? I'm conscious of something, always. Consciousness is partial and changeable. Awareness is total, changeless, calm, and silent. And it is the common matrix of every experience. So that sense of, call it consciousness without an object, or somehow the purest, simplest form, but it is beyond change, right? It's prior to change, and so that it isn't consciousness. Consciousness is a knowledge with. That's the con in consciousness, where we're shown an illusion, a very useful illusion, as we've heard already, that it's the user interface, if you like, a simplification that helps us get by in this particular world. So it serves survival, but it's nothing like the ultimate truth. To use the word truth is not quite right, but that's back to the awareness. If you use the same word for both, then you're bound to be muddled. So I'm with the teacher of let's use awareness for this particular term. And I was first really struck by this by thinking about, well, when I go through the neti process of removing all my thoughts and all my, I might be this, but I'm not, I've got a feeling, here I am sitting to the right instead of the left, we could switch that, all the things that change, all the features that could change. You go through the whole list, what are you left with? You're left with something, because you've removed all the things that change. So you're still, here I've removed all the things that change. That's a thought already, but there's something that you have given to you, your being, your presence, that there is something there already. Now, to me, that at first feels like, well, it's sort of like a nothing, It seems like dim, or a point, or just it's contracted to something that doesn't seem inherently interesting. Yet, I read Alan's description of how the Tibetans view this, and what is the nature of this? It's luminous. Luminous? Where does that illumination come from? But why do they see it as having, they being people who have spent years and generations developing an ability to observe what is at the core of being? Why do they see something different from what you might see on the surface? We see, our consciousness, it reflects what call it the mirror of awareness, to use that metaphor. It reflects something going on in the world. But how does it reflect it? It depends on the mirror, right? If you've got a funhouse mirror and you're distorted by your fears and wishes and desires and everything that causes it not to reflect back what's just there, but it adds to it what you want to be there, what you fear to be there, those biases. And so you don't get the clear mirror any longer. Instead, you get something closer from not reflective consciousness, but refractive consciousness. And that's what our ordinary consciousness is like. When we think we're reflecting, we're really refracting. We're taking the input and we change it as we give it back. So the kind of symbol for the the consciousness that isn't consciousness, the awareness, would be something like, here we've got this nice little reflective sphere. And this sphere could be a symbol then of what our awareness would be if we could know it without the obscurations, the things that are in the way. And so what is in the way, it's not just what I've described as the distortions and biases, but it's also all of the conceptual overlay that we add to any experience. That one of the features that we know consciousness has is that different parts of it are simply superimposed, they superposition. And so that when we have a visual experience, I think that's water, we also have many other elements that may not be sensory at all that goes with that, of the context. Here I am, I'm feeling thirsty, should I grab that water now, etc. All this stuff, but it's also things that we're totally unconscious of. We don't really even know what we're bringing to this experience. And so all of that stuff is harder to get rid of. You can't just say, okay, forget all that stuff. You don't even know what it is. And so that's the thing that's very hard to get to what is at the core. So may I share a very short dream that illustrates how lucid dreaming can lead you to this experience, of how you can actually have a closer view of the kinds of things that certainly come from extensive meditation and practice and that. But you can also, in a lucid dream, say, I want this dream not to be what I want, not what the dream ego wants, what I'm used to wanting, but to say, I'd like to be shown something that's beyond myself. I want to be guided by whatever guru source of wisdom is in me, something that knows better than I, in the limited self. That's what I want to be shown. And so for me, I formulated that as I want to have an experience of the highest potential. And so here I'm going directly into a lucid dream one morning. I find myself driving down the road. It seems as if I just got in my little sports car and on the way to Stanford, because everything is green and the golf course and all is vividly beautiful. And I'm driving down the road and I see off to the side there an attractive hitchhiker. And my first impulse is to think, well, I could stop, pick her up, etc., But then I remember that I've already had that dream. and that what I want is beyond that. It's the highest potential. Now, the moment I make that little bit of renunciation, so I give up something, it's sort of a direct pleasure of a lesser sort. Say, all right, that's not what matters. Here's, remember. And so I have to deliberately do that. The car now and I start to fly into the air. And as we fly upward into the clouds, through the clouds, there are symbols of traditional religion. Star of David, a steeple with a cross on top of it. But it's basically, there's religion in these clouds. And I fly higher and the car disappears. The vehicle of the car is gone, and so is the vehicle of my body now has fallen away as well. So I go beyond that into whatever's beyond all that. It's an emptiness, this inner outer space. It's going into this vast space that is empty, and surprisingly, amazingly, it feels like homecoming. What's this? I had forgotten all about this state, this presence, this level of being that has always been here. It still is. Where is it? Not over there somewhere. It's here. I just haven't seen it. I've forgotten about it. Overwhelmed with joy, just singing songs of praise about the bliss of how the world's so perfectly arranged. And woke up with a sense of yes, I remember the joy, and I remember the sense of harmony and connection and oneness. But much of what I knew in the dream was no longer with me. It was the esoteric component didn't come along with me when I was back on my usual beach monkey level, right? But when I interpreted this dream, say, well, what is that? That somehow was an answer to what I was asking for of the highest potential. It felt like an answer. It felt like, yes, this is something, but it was surprising. Why? It was basically nothing, right? It was an emptiness, but the surprisingness is that nothing was more like a plenum. It was full of potential, of all being, love, and it was the source of it all. It was home somehow. And that realization also then unfolded further to say, what about death? What happens at death? We think in terms of this annihilation that Alan was referring to a bit ago, the standard Western view of what happens if you're a materialist. It's like the analogy that I'll take. So consider Stephen is a specific individual. He's a unique individual. You might say he's this particular snowflake, right? A nice, unique crystalline structure, different from everyone else, right? This one, that's me. So this flake, sees himself falling into the sea of death. There's this vast ocean, and what's going to happen? Oh my God, it's the end. I'm just going to be melted, annihilated. It's the end of me, period, right? It's obvious, that's it. But maybe what happens instead is one experiences, instead of that, whatever the nothingness would be, annihilation, not feeling happy or unhappy or anything, instead, an infinite expansion of being as I remember that I wasn't just that one droplet of frozen water, but all water, the sea. You see, and that I've been identifying only with this one partial, tiny piece. It's really very lovely, isn't it? There's this crystalline form, it's unique and all that. Yes, but in comparison to the infinitude, the majesty of the sea, that is something that's easily let go of. Say, okay, maybe I continue in some other form or not, I don't know. But it doesn't matter compared to the other sense, the deeper sense of identification, a being that I experience. I say, there's something vastly more than what I thought I was.
But this realization of the vastness and
Yes.
your role into it happened in the dream or in the waking state, or
Yes.
is there a separation?
They connect together because one of the things that when you have this kind of realization, it's a realization that isn't dependent on the dream. The dream was an occasion for one having an experience, but then also it's the reflection upon the experience. It wasn't just that was it and that's the whole story. What we remember, perceive is our interpretation of reality. So that interpretive process is important here. And so by unwrapping the package, say, all right, here was that dream that I felt. This answered the question somehow. It was what I was asking for. So now, how do I understand it? How do I make the most of what it's showing me somehow? And of course, it's not the answer, but it is an answer that provided value for me. So that value is just as much available to me in the waking state as in the dream state. The dream state gives us a special occasion where we can test realities, do things that you can't do ordinarily, you can't do because it violates the laws of physics or the laws of society. In the dream world, you have a freedom. You have your kind of sandbox where you can try out anything, not just play, but safely experiment with how to be. And from that, you can learn and apply that to the rest of your life. So also by choosing to make what you decide to do in the dream, changing your frame on the circumstance, the way you experience and respond to the circumstances, as opposed to magically altering it, you then get something you could use in other states. So if I encounter an ogre in one state and I say, oh, okay, it's a dream, so I can just turn this ogre into a toad and no problem, right? Okay, maybe so, but now I'm in another life situation. It's my boss that seems like the ogre. Now, can I just turn him into a toad and that solves the problem? No, not at all. So that doesn't help. It's state specific. So let's have something instead where if I realize that by looking at this ogre with love and ask any sentient being is worthy of, then why not, they change. In the dream, you see the immediate effect of what's in your heart in terms of other dream figures. They change instantly, unlike in this world where it takes more time and maybe not in a lifetime you experience this. But in the dream state, there's this perfect, instantaneous response. It's like the place where Christianity works. Love your enemies and they become your friends the moment you love them. And wow. This is something that I really wish everybody could experience for themselves. Wow. The power of being able to transform your experience in the dream just by the genuine authenticity of love, for example. So that you're in touch with love, you know what love is, and you apply it directly, and it gives a direct result. So that, wow. For me, is the most powerful aspect of how one can learn from the lucid dreaming in a quicker way what can happen in the rest of your life with more time and work, right? And so it's not saying, okay, I'm done, I did it. It's a lucid dream, that's it, I'm through here, right? Because you gotta, you understand that you get what you pay for, right? And in terms of spiritual as well as anything else, and if you don't keep up the payments, they take it back. So
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. That's what I loved. When I first encountered you, I thought about lucid dreaming. Mm-hmm. I would have picked up the hitchhiker. Mm. Yes. But then we interviewed.
Sure.
But when we interviewed you the first time, I realized this is a serious tool.
Yeah.
This is a serious tool in the spiritual path, not to be taken lightly.
Yes.
And so, can you give us a little bit ammunition about the relationship between lucid dreaming and non-duality, or is lucid dreaming a meditation?
Yeah. The sort of the issues of non-duality and identification apply on all levels, and they apply in the state we're in right now and in the dream state. And so there are different ways to approach the concept, but these are still conceptual approaches. So the experience aspect, the dream I described was something, it was non-dual. That was the problem. Remember, I said, it was somehow I praised the Lord, but there wasn't any I, there wasn't any Lord, there wasn't two things. That didn't make sense, right? So it was about the unity, the non-duality. But the very nature of non-duality is that's what can't be said. Everything that you can say, as Wittgenstein tells us, can be said clearly. But that doesn't exhaust all the possibilities. Because that is to say, if I would distinguish this table, I mean not the things surrounding, not the chair, not the people here, right? And I have to make a distinction, and I can't make a particular indication without making a distinction. So that's just the way it is for specific indication. But there is another way, and that is what you'd call metaphor, the indirect path. So we can talk about what can't be talked about, as I'm just doing right now to say I can talk about what can't be talked about. It's ironic. It's part of what it is. It is not direct. So you have to go indirectly around this, and that's one of the reasons there's so much diversity in how different people describe the state or the situation or the nature of non-duality, as well as a commonality that are all sort of pointing in the same direction. For me, the way to I encapsulate it in a haiku, for example, about what the sense of the distinctions between things that are separate and we can talk about, and that other thing that is what I, and by I mean every one of you, same I, truly am. And that is that I am a metaphor. Little finger pointing beyond either or. So we have the sense that sign language, little letter I, somehow refers to me, but is pointing where? Beyond either or, not to something that can be distinguished. Yet, we know what that is. See, it's the one thing that we can't talk about. Say that in itself is a reference. The thing we can't talk about, the thing we can't put into words, that. There can't be two of them, right? If there were two of them, it's something you can describe in words. It's this thing you can't talk about, and that thing you can't talk about, and again, you made a distinction. So the one thing, the given, is my favorite term for it. Simply the given, what we all can't doubt. It's what must be so. It's the only thing like that there is a something prior to all these changes, and call it God, call it I am, call it awareness. Those are just different words, whatever we prefer, okay? So.
And what about meditation? Can you use it? What's the relationship? Can you use lucid dreaming?
Yeah. Some people think that lucid dreaming is itself a meditative state. I don't think that's quite right. I think it's more like it's got a lot in common with various meditative practices, and it can be used for meditative purposes. But it's also, for example, the most typical you'll find in lucid dreaming with your teenage boy. I wasn't thinking of dream sex. I was thinking actually of sort of the video game thing where, all right, so here I am and I know I'm dreaming and then the bad guys are after me. Okay, so I'm going to make this super machine gun where I can shoot everybody more effectively. Sort of like what you saw in Inception, right? The concept, you really think big when you're dreaming, right? Thinking big, a big gun? Not really. So... But that's a starting point, you see, and so that we all start with simply pleasure. We do things because we like it, right? And we tend to re-experience and do it again because if it's pleasurable, that is worth a repetition, right? And that's sort of one of the definitions of pleasure. But we find that there are limits to whatever level we're on. We find there are deeper meanings, deeper values. Something like, think of art. That we cultivate an appreciation for art that we didn't have as children. Children can do many things that we have forgotten how as adults, but one of them isn't really to appreciate art in its many forms, that it takes an education, a sentimental education of the person, which can also be attained through dreams, for example. So we don't have to, in order to learn from experience, we don't have to have experiences that are external. They can be imaginative, you might say, right? The things that we experience by going within. And dreams, I think, are a wonderful example of that, where we have real experiences, real things happen to us that can change our lives. So that potential to say that dreams have that ability to show us what kind of world may be. Here's another alternative. We have the opportunity with lucid dreaming to say, I can take responsibility for this dream. And I can only do that by knowing what is going on and understanding what my situation is. Otherwise, I am not going to be able to. So dream responsibility requires lucidity. And then we can actually say, if the world I'm experiencing, say a nightmare, suppose I have unpleasant dreams, say, well, this is the kind of world that we'd have if it were only up to me, because it's my own private experience. I am, by my responses, reactions, or lack thereof, of trying to escape, I'm creating a world for myself. And so that same question reversed to say, I want to make the most of it. I want to say, for example, I'm going to embrace every figure I find in the dream. So if there's anyone I'm avoiding, any unpleasant, ogreish figure, somebody I want to get away from, I'm going to do the opposite. Instead, I'm going to seek them out. I'm going to embrace and do my best to accept them in the open-heartedness that really is in common with the Buddhist ideal of extending that wish for goodness to all sentient beings, not just yourself. For me, I go slightly a bit further because I don't really require it of sentient beings, because mostly I don't know whether or not the beings I encounter are sentient or not. So here's a crowd, apparently, of a lot of people. Some of you may actually just be some sort of,
Don't look
robot
at me.
or a...
Don't look at me.
Now, this one seems pretty real, but I don't know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm just going to extend that as a matter of principle to whatever I meet in any way and say, I don't need to see your reality papers before I act with love.
I love it. I so love it. I so love it. Thank you. Just one more, because unluckily the time is that. So, are you saying that lucid dreaming are better than regular dreaming?
Yeah. Well, this is it's a kind of controversial issue, which is say, are lucid dreams better, or the more developed, or the more exalted, spiritual, or anything like that? It depends. And I gave an example where they weren't, with a video game, teenagers, or clearly that's not a more advanced state. Now, in fact, I think that you don't always want to be explicitly conscious of the fact that you're dreaming. And a very simple example of that is one dream I had when I was about 20. In the dream, I'm going up a mountain road, and it's beginning to get kind of hard going. And I feel that my legs are getting a bit leaden, and that, in fact, now I'm crawling, and I feel this sense of absolute weakness is filling my body. It's like the Socrates and the hemlock. And I can just suddenly feel this is the end. I, in another moment, am going to just plain die. It's the end, really. This. What am I going to do with my last moment? And I decide I'm going to embrace it with full acceptance. I'm going to completely accept this last moment. And that amounted to action. I could let out my last breath. And with that expiration, a rainbow came out of my heart. And wow, what a different view of death.
So cool.
Now, ask yourself, would that have happened if I said, oh, yeah, I'm dreaming I'm about to die? Right? It would have lacked the dramatic power. It wouldn't have really drawn out that, really, this is it. You're not going to wake up in a minute, and be able to this is it. It's the end. So I'd say that shows us that in some circumstances it makes sense that we may do better, get more from the experience by not thinking about, oh, yes, this is all a dream. Right? Even though that in other circumstances, it's vastly better to know it's a dream, because then you can act in a way that makes real sense, that it makes the most of it. So I think we have to be flexible about the use of that. Because you can also say, here we are in life, okay? And this life thing is often described as, God pretending that he doesn't know he's God, right? And that's what each of us, we're finding that out, right? And sure, it would spoil the game if we all just plain knew at the very beginning, oh yeah, right, here I'm God pretending I'm not God, right? So what, the point is that life must have some purpose, some value, some reason for being aside from just a mistake. I don't think this is what I hear often in the East, is that the view that life is just a mistake. It's if you knew better, you wouldn't be doing this, right? Well, that's about equivalent to the materialist view that there's no meaning to life. It's all just random. It's all just an accident, right? So it's not like, a stupid accident. It's just, just an accident, though. It just happened, but there's no deeper meaning. And I think what is the deepest meaning for us all? It's meaning. And love is usually the answer of why, actually, that we come up as a reasonable start for what might be an answer for that. But so I think there's got to be more to it. And Kate's described it as the process of going through life is not a veil of tears, but instead it is we have the horn book, the notebook in which the soul is writing down the experiences, is impressing on this somehow level of ourselves the meaning of what's true in life. And so this learning, this educational process then actually requires, at some points, pain, suffering, in order to get the message across, that somehow we become so thick-headed, so slow to perceive reality that's what it takes and nothing less will get our attention somehow. So that may be a reason for pain and suffering. Again, that doesn't mean we must persist in it. That would seem to be not getting the message somehow, right? So, but I think the broader problem is that any formulation, anything we say, this is what it's all about, or this is how it works, one distinct thing is like a particular map. So to say, materialism, the basic, what is behind consciousness are brains, and brains evolving out of matter and all. And that explains a lot. It makes sense in certain perspectives. Say, well, what mind was on Earth, 4.5 billion years ago when there weren't any organisms, no brains, no anything like that. Then you have to, if you believe mind was prior, then you have to say, well, it was some other kind of mind. It's sort of the mind beyond all of anything, the awareness thing that I'm agreeing it must be there. But if you look at other aspects, the materialist view is very hard to explain consciousness. Because so you're now looking at consciousness, and it's much easier to look at it from the idealism point of view. So we've got maps that, if they're global maps, they must have errors in them. It must have, if we're going from the sphere here to a plane representation, a map, and we're projecting, there must be a tear in that map where things just don't work. So that if you've got a map where you're looking at the local part on the North Pole, then fine, but it's going to be wrong around the equator, and vice versa. If you've got a good map of the equator, it's going to be absurd at the poles, where every direction is south, for example, no matter where you go, and other anomalies. What that tells us, every map, every worldview, every way it might be is a limited map of reality. And we should remember that.
And that's a great line to close.
I
love it. Isn't it incredible? So we talk about dreaming, and we find ourselves with a new path that we can explore.
Yeah.
We can find a new path of exploration of our... So it's not that we only explore our spiritual search daytime, now we can work at nighttime.
Yeah, no.
The real seekers.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen.
So that exploration, right?
Wait, they're going to kill me because I'm 10 minutes over time.
We're 10 minutes over time. They're
going to kill me.
We're already dead. There you go. Since we're already dead, voices from beyond, and they're saying that the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time.
Oh. Thank you, man.